Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Neumaier, film critic for WOR Radio. And let's have another huge round of applause, please, for the Hot Zone. And now, please join me in welcoming Julianna Margulies. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us, Julianna.
Thank you for having me. Is this on?
Yep. Can you guys hear us well? Yep. Excellent.
Can you hear?
There is this. Oh my gosh, this film is. I've seen all 6 episodes, which has gone through all 10 fingernails. It's intense. It's terrifying. It's exciting. And Dr. Nancy Jaax is a really interesting character because there is so much going on there. She's so tough. She sort of is playing 3-dimensional chess with the Ebola virus, trying to figure out where it's going to be and where it's come from and what's going on with it. What were some of the keys to her for you in kind of figuring her out?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a loaded question. I apologize. I've been doing a lot of interviews today, so I have a lozenger because I was drying out. Yeah. So first of all, I feel very strongly when I didn't know about this story. I don't think most of us did. Maybe people read the book when it came out in '94. But when I was approached with the material, I was so taken by the fact that I had never known that Ebola had hit U.S. soil in 1989, and that this woman at the top of her field, in a man's world, had to climb hurdles just to be heard. Her scientific background, her expertise were constantly doubted, and she climbed over every hurdle just to try and save 6 million people from getting wiped out, because that's what would have happened if this had been Ebola Zaire. It would have wiped out the city of D.C., which is 6 million people, and faster than you can close down the highways. And it's 2019. I mean, when I took the job, it was 2018. But I was so taken by the fact that I was still reading all these articles about Ebola, and the fact that this is a global crisis, but because it's in Africa for some reason, we don't think it affects us. So I felt that her story was important to be told, and I just think she is an unsung American hero, and we need to pay homage to her.
Yeah, and a science hero as well, which is obviously so crucial at this point in history. So it was crucial in 1989 when she was, I guess I read she was like there were 8 women out of 80 in her class that were women. And but at this moment to kind of be able to encourage the pursuit of science and to sort of recognize how important this is, right? You've had some events where you've kind of talked with people about this and you've seen this firsthand, right?
Yeah, it's remarkable. And I got to do a lot of press with Nancy Jaax last week in Los Angeles, which was, first of all, a relief for me, because every time they had any kind of a scientific question, I was like, "Great question, Nancy," because I'm just an actor. If I had her brain, I would be doing something much more worthwhile, I'm sure. But the effect, first of all, what I didn't know about the Hot Zone actually itself, the book, is that middle school kids are reading it. And one of the things Nancy was saying last week when we were talking to the Los Angeles Times was she said, it is so important that we get our young children interested in science because that's our future. And we have to train. Her training took so long just to be able to do what she was doing. And we need to make sure we have enough people to keep up the work and to keep, finding out cures and vaccines. And there still isn't a cure. There's a vaccine for Ebola, but there is not a vaccine for Ebola Zaire. Ebola is such a fascinating pathogen because it is constantly changing and evolving. You can't see it. So if you can't see it, you don't think it's there, and then you don't pay attention to it. Right? People only pay attention to people who are flapping their arms about and tweeting stupid things because it's attention getting, but it's not. The real fear is when you can't see something and then putting your head in the sand and pretending it doesn't exist. To me, that's the real fear. And these scientists understand that. And so we need to raise our children in a world where they get excited to learn about science, and so that we can combat climate change and Ebola and all these diseases that are wiping out villages. I mean, since August 2018, right now it's only been reported that there's been 1,150 deaths because of Ebola in Eastern Congo. But that's underreporting. They're saying there's many, many more that haven't been reported. And that's 2019. This movie took place in 1989. What are we doing? Why aren't we being active? And why aren't we supporting our scientists with the research and the money they need for it?
Yeah, and in 2015, you see at the end of the 6th episode, which, by the way, the show starts on Nat Geo on May 27th. We'll repeat that at the end as well, because you guys definitely want to catch all episodes of it. But in 2015, 11,000 people or so were killed in that outbreak.
In Sierra Leone.
In Sierra Leone in 2015, yeah.
So the person I trained under to learn everything I was doing in the lab and to make sure I was doing everything correctly and saying the words correctly is a man named Dr. Michael Schmitt, who happens to be Nancy Jaax's real-life nephew. And he happens to be one of the top infectious disease specialists in the United States. And in 2015, he went to Sierra Leone when there was a huge outbreak of Ebola Zaire. And it was devastating villages. They were just getting wiped out, 11,000 people, like that. And he went there with a bunch of doctors from all over the world to help, to try and get the agents so they could do the research to find a cure, to find a vaccine. And this was at a time when the guy who's now in the White House tweeted, "Don't let these stupid people back in our country." Now, can you imagine being there? And this is a man who every day got into one of those suits. And by the way, this is an interesting, he told me he would weigh himself before he would get in the suit. And then he would go into these infected zones where he was trying to help patients. And he would come out 2 hours later and he had lost 10 pounds.
Oh, my God.
And that was their life. For 2 months, they did this every single day. They didn't touch each other. You can't touch each other, so they would elbow bump or hip bump just to have some sort of contact, because it's a very lonely experience when you're in those suits and you feel isolated and quite alone, and you're dealing with death all around you. And there they are, not trying to be heroes. They're trying to do their job, which is scientific research, so that not if, but when this happens again on U.S. soil, because it will, we will know what to do. And here's a moron tweeting out, "Don't let them back in our country." And he's not doing it for anything but our country. And so these doctors not only risk their lives every day, but they risk ridiculous ridicule from unintelligent, uninformed idiots that have no idea that it doesn't matter how rich you are or who you are, you will die when you get Ebola Zaire. There's just no question. There's a 90% fatality rate. So I read all of this and listened to it, and I just thought, I have the luxury of picking projects. How can I turn my back to something that's so important, that needs to be heard? And thanks to Nat Geo, I have to say I couldn't imagine a better place for a subject like this, because they are going to air it in 171 countries.
That's amazing. Wow.
So that we can all wake up.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the hazmat suit in a moment, because somebody has a question about that, but we'll save that because there's a lot of good information on that. Let's talk about kind of the performance kind of going into that hazmat suit in some ways, because we were just talking about this a couple of minutes ago. What I love about this character and your performance is that there's an aspect to it that's almost a little bit like a detective trying to track down a serial killer, almost like you're kind of figuring out the threads, where is it, but it's this metastasizing disease, and it's a something that could be anywhere at any time. But there's also an action hero aspect to her, the very physical aspect to her, and the scene with Noah Emmerich as Nancy's husband Jerry, after Nancy comes out and they're having that discussion, and he's saying, what about the kids? What about your responsibilities to us? That's the kind of thing that's gender flipped in a lot of ways. We are often used to seeing that be a male in that role, and I love that it's a woman saying, look, this is what I'm prepared to do. This is what I was trained to do. And kind of the layers of kind of performance and building that character for you. What was that like?
Yeah, they have a fascinating relationship, and they're fabulous. And I don't think either of them would have survived in any other marriage except to themselves, because they both were at USAMRIID, and they met in veterinarian school. And I think you have to understand that line of work in order to stand by. And I mean, she was going into biohazard level 4 labs and, dealing with deathly pathogens every day. So there was always a chance of her dying. But she never thought that way. I mean, I really picked her brain about that. And she said, I never for a minute. She said, the one time when I had that cut, and it was stupid that she went in the first episode, you see it, she said, I'm in the decontamination chamber, and I thought, oh my God, this actually could be it. She said that was the only time she ever really thought she was in a life or death situation, because she was in her happy place in that hazmat suit. She was so passionate about it. And that's why Jerry was with her. You want to be with someone who's passionate about what they do, right? And he understands her line of work. At the same time, the human aspect is, but I'm a parent, and I'm your spouse, and we have a family, and what's more important? So you can really understand the juxtaposition between understanding someone's work and saying, stop being an idiot, our kids, but her scope of it was always, it's just not about our kids. If I don't do something, it's about 6 million kids. We're all gonna die. So I feel like it was a tricky scene. That first scene, that was the first time me and Noah ever met too. Oh, really? Yeah. Wow. We had to do that scene, and I was like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. I really admire your work, and we had this hilarious banter. But and then he said, I sound like a pussy. I got to figure out how to make this and he managed to show such humanity and understanding without looking emasculated in that moment. So kudos to him for being able to if the real Nancy and Jerry were here, actually they watched the first 2 episodes with their kids and texted me afterwards and said, well, our kids throughout the whole thing kept going, oh my God, guys, that's you. So that was really a compliment to Noah, because he managed to
capture
them.
Specifically. Since we have a room full of actors here, I want to kind of follow up on that aspect to it, on having that be your first scene with Noah. And when you're kind of going into a scene like that, that's going to say so much about the characters and kind of tell us about the relationship, sort of aspects we feel but don't see. What's it like for the two of you to kind of establish that sort of bond really quickly? Is it, that you sort of said hi, how you doing? But there's obviously a little bit more going in there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's always so awkward for actors, playing husband and wife. We've known each other in the story for 30 years or 20 years, whatever it was, and we have kids, and yet he and I had never met. Thank God, we both respected each other so much going into it, and we were so excited to work together and he's such a professional, that it was easy. We immediately just started joking, and we're like, we have 5 minutes to say hello and figure this out, because there wasn't a lot of time in this shooting, because we were always on location and running out of time and money. But right away I knew I'd be in good hands, because he was so open, and I look at it. Acting's reacting, right? So it's like tennis. If you're playing with a really good player, you're going to act better. And that's how I felt with him. And I could just really sit back and watch and just react truthfully to what he was doing. And I think he felt the same way, and it really was a joy. It's so, when you work with a great actor, it's not hard.
Speaking of acting as reacting, I'm going to obviously use that as a launching off point to talk about Liam Cunningham and your scenes with him as Wade Carter, and also Topher Grace, who's terrific,
Yes.
you know, playing a great Weasley guy as Peter Jarling, and the aspect that there's two different sort of emotional keys that have to be hit there. One is obviously Nancy has an affection for her former professor, for Wade Carter, and then she also is generationally looking at Peter, who's a little younger and kind of a kind of an uppity guy and not necessarily wanting to listen to her. And as an actress kind of hitting those points, there's kind of interesting sort of pivots of one is to the left and a little bit warmer, and then the other one is a little bit more, look, here's how we have to do it, Peter, this is the way it has to be. It's interesting to hit those 2 points in two different sort of registers, right?
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated because also, so Peter touts the fact, and I thought Topher did such a great job, but that character has a PhD, and he touts it over her head all the time. You know, he's like, I have a PhD. And she just doesn't buy it.
Yeah.
You know, she respects anyone who has a PhD, whatever.
Yeah.
You have a PhD. I'm a pathologist.
Right. So apples and
Whatever.
oranges, right? Yeah.
Let's just deal with the problems.
Yeah.
And I actually think there's a great play on sexes there in that he needs his ego fed to be acknowledged that he has a PhD, and she could really give a shit.
Yeah.
You know, she's a worker.
Yeah.
She's a tomboy. She is a woman who, you know, rode horses her whole life and has a gazillion animals everywhere, and she like these little stupid things. Let's just do the work.
Yeah.
And I think it's also hard for, especially when you look, I know it doesn't seem like that long ago, but 1989 was, 30 years ago and back, he somehow did feel that he had the upper hand in decisions because he was male.
Yeah.
And I think for Nancy, her relationship with Liam Cunningham's character, he's her mentor.
Yeah.
And she has tremendous respect, but you also have to remember this is a man who was ostracized because he was raising red flags and they were scared he was going to cause mayhem with his findings. And he was kicked out of USAMRIID. So when that little, light goes off where she suddenly goes, wait, is he overreacting? Am I going to... So it's a delicate balance between what is right and what's fiction in this moment and what the right steps to take are. But I think that she is always trying to sort of be the bridge to both sides.
Right. Yeah, that's beautifully said. That's exactly right. We're going to take some questions here from the audience. One question says that, and this is the hazmat question, we heard you say that it's hard to hear in that hazmat suit. And how do you act in a hazmat suit like that when you've got that level of sort of protection between you and your other actors, or even between you and the director? How does that work? How's the difficulties?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things I love about my job is that I am constantly learning. It really is true. You have to constantly reinvent yourself as an actor, because I've been learning crazy dialogue for 20 years, ER, medical dialogue, and then legal jargon, 9-page summations. I would learn in 2 hours at night when I got home after a 14-hour day. I could do it. It's not a problem. This scientific dialogue in a hazmat suit really threw me. In a way that I've never been thrown. I love a challenge, and I'll admit it, I cried 3 times in the suit on camera when I wasn't supposed to, out of frustration. And there were several factors that led to it. One is I found out I'm really claustrophobic. So they zipped it up, and I went, oh my God, I can't do it. You just start to panic. But the worst part, aside from feeling claustrophobic, is that in order to have air ventilating, there's 2 fans in the back of the hazmat suit that are whirring. So it would be like trying to write your thesis on genetic engineering while a jackhammer is going on next door. I'm trying to think of the word immunofluorescence, which doesn't roll naturally off my tongue. I don't know about you. But it completely threw me, and my mind would go blank because I was so distracted by this A, feeling of alienation, B, I couldn't hear or really see anyone. I just felt like I was so alone. So I decided okay, you have a challenge. You have to figure out how to do this because you are getting paid and you are a professional and stop your whining. So I learned how to learn lines with distraction. Now, so all my life I would go to bed with my script and like, if for me anyway, if I learn it first thing before I go to sleep, I usually know it by the morning because somehow it goes in there. Sometimes I'd even put my script on my head and pray. But you want to, especially playing someone like her, and the scientific dialogue is so foreign to me. I needed it to be flawless. I needed it to just, plus you're having to do all this stuff in the lab to look right. So we shot this in Toronto, and thank God I was in a hotel room and not at home because my family would have thought I was insane. I realized that I had to move while I learned lines and do things. So I would put my scripts. We were also shooting 3 episodes at a time. So I didn't know if I was coming or going. So I put my scripts all over my pages, all over my hotel room, and I would give myself activities. You're going to fold your laundry while you're saying this stuff, and you're going to go floss your teeth and try and da-da-da, and now go and do some push-ups, and now go stretch. And that's how I learned lines every night because I knew I wouldn't retain it with the distraction. It also, talking about acting as reacting, is an awful thing when I would get it all out. I'd be so excited I got out this tough stuff and did all the things, and I knew Topher had a line, but I couldn't hear him. And I'd wait, and then I'd look around, all I'm hearing is, and I would go, this one scene, I think they actually have it on camera. I went, and I see the director waving, "We can see you." And I right, because you're so distracted by this beast that's on you, plus it weighs 50 pounds.
Right.
So every time you're trying to lift up your arm, and of course, they're made for men.
Right.
And these were modeled off of the 1989 ones, exactly. They weigh 50 pounds, and so where it would hit a man is here on the collarbone. But where it hit me, because I'm smaller, is here. So every time I was trying to lift up a pipette to look professional, I was lifting up the 50 pounds. It was one of those things where, and I know no one's offering me this, but I did call, this is a true story. I called my agents and I said, if Martin Scorsese calls and offers me $5 million to do a movie in a hazmat suit, no. It was harder than doing The Good Wife with a newborn.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny because you think about physical acting, you think about the physical challenges. That's something that you sort of don't think about, is obviously not only just having to lift up the 50 pounds, but also doing the things as you're reciting your lines and the sense memory.
And thank God for Michael Schmitt, because I had a one day to work with him in the lab. Where he showed me everything, and he lined. And I remember the first day looking at all these instruments and being like, "Oh my God!" I mean, that blade, that diamond blade that you see me cut that thing with, that it was real. That was right there, and it was incredible to see it all. I got very overwhelmed, and I said, "You know what? Rome wasn't built in a day. Take me step by step through everything," and then I would do it over and over and over again. Of course, forgetting that then I had to learn the lines to do it. But it also was it's like ballet, really. It was such a dance. Yeah. And my favorite scene is when I take the cadet through all the steps to get to the biohazard level 4 lab, because I felt like that's inviting us mere plebeians in to understand the world of science and what these jobs were. And I don't think you'd ever seen that in a film about this kind of a thing before. Yeah, I love that, actually. That's sort of, in a way, it sort of like telegraphs exactly what that life is like and what the hot zone is and what the specifics are of going from level 1 to level 2 and all those things. You actually predicted the next question, which was, what was your best moment while filming this project? You mentioned that was sort of your favorite scene, though. Maybe we could also say challenging. We could adapt that to anything. Yeah, it was challenging. I have to say the best moment was always after. It took me about a week to learn these monologues. I've never been so gobsmacked at how hard, because I don't understand what it is. ER's cakewalk compared to this stuff. I'm like, well, I know what a catheter is, you know, I understand that stuff. But because it was such a foreign language, my best moments were always when I finished a scene that I was working so hard on and it went well, you know. So that scene walking through the labs doesn't seem like a lot of dialogue, but it's actually 6 pages of just me talking. And I remember so clearly, I would fly home every weekend. So whatever, I'd get on a 9 a.m. flight on Saturdays back to New York, and I'd have my script all over my seat on the plane, and then I'd fly back and I'd have the seat, and then I'd write. That's another thing I learned. I used to do it for summations on The Good Wife, but I also learned that if I write everything down, I will see that in my brain. Your brain's an amazing muscle, and it is quite remarkable how you can apply it to work for you, you know? So I would have these long pages of scientific jargon that I didn't understand, and as I started writing it, it would get easier to memorize. So that was probably my favorite moment, because it took so long to memorize that 6 pages of dialogue. And also I loved that moment when she said, it's like giving birth. Oh, right, you haven't done that. You know, I love that she had a little humor. I think Brian and Kelly did such a great job with the writing in that scene, because it's, you know, it can't all be maudlin. It can't all be dark. And so I loved that she got a little levity in that moment.
Yeah. To wrap up, I want to ask about you mentioned obviously The Good Wife and ER, and when working on a limited series like this, a 6-episode like this, do you approach kind of the building of the character a little bit differently? Obviously, you know, it's not an open end. You don't have a full season to work with. You've just got those 6 episodes, and obviously the writing is the writing. But I'm wondering, like, when you're approaching the character, Julianna, is there sort of a sense of kind of hitting those beats a little bit different, or kind of spacing them out in certain ways?
Well, it certainly is a luxury. I love the format. I call it a miniseries. Call me old school. I don't understand this limited event, whatever. It's a miniseries. It's 6 episodes.
That's right.
And I love the format, because it's like reading a great novel. You know, you get to turn each page, and you get to really grow with the characters, but you still get a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is not what you get when you're doing series television. Right. You know, when I'm doing 22 episodes and you don't know whether it's getting picked up or not, you're sort of just flying by the seat of your pants how your character's going to go out or not go out, or which is also a luxury, because you get to grow with the character. But with a miniseries, you really get the full story and grow with your character, but have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you can form a bit of an arc. And it was touching. I don't know. I was very touched by Nancy Jaax. There was a moment at the end, after being in that horrific monkey house and euthanizing the 400 monkeys, where she's talking to her cadets, and she says, you know, the world won't know about what you did in here, but I will. I had to do that over, because I kept getting emotional when I was saying it, and I didn't. Nancy doesn't get emotional, but Julianna does, because I was just in awe of these young faces staring back at me that had just risked everything, and this really happened, and none of them got any recognition. So it was just such a strong moment. So that might have been another moment of my favorites. Yeah,
and it, as a takeaway, we were talking about this just now, one of your big takeaways is that people really, we talked about it earlier, people really appreciate the science and that aspect of kind of what people went through at that moment, and obviously up to today in science to get us to where we're going, right?
It's so important. I never was interested in science in school. Maybe I didn't have a good science teacher. I don't know. I didn't have the environment to be interested in science. And I regret that now, because this is, I feel woke. To really, just how important science is, and I really was ignorant. And I just want people to feel excited about, not just panicked. And I'm quoting Topher. He takes credit for this. He said something great. This is a popcorn thriller until you realize it happened, and then it's a horror movie. Which I think is exactly right. So I don't want people to just feel fear seeing this. I want them to be inspired to act.
Yeah, I think it's terrific, inspiring, and exciting, and all of those things. It starts May 27th on Nat Geo. Ladies and gentlemen, Julianna Margulies, and the TV series is The Hot Zone. Thank you so much.